a minute or two to see if we can get more people in the room. So there's people joining us as we speak. So we'll give it another minute or so, and we shall be talking this afternoon about mental toughness, my favourite subject. So one of the things you might want to start thinking about in the next minute or two while we wait is, what's your definition of mental toughness? What does mental toughness mean to you? So if you have got some thoughts on it, then by all means use the chat box. You can use the chat box just to say hello, but you also use the chat box to give me your thoughts. Mental toughness, what is it? How would you define it? So let's wait another minute or two, and then we shall begin this afternoon's workshop webinar. So just another 30 seconds, folks. Once again, if you've just joined, then welcome, good afternoon. And we have got, say, about 30 seconds before we start on mental toughness for well-being. So glad you could join us. And as I said, please use the chat box, and we can already start to see some thoughts on mental toughness. What is it? What's your definition of mental toughness? So if you've got a definition, then please just put it down with there. So mental fitness, the ability to deal with adverse conditions without it causing personal issues, like that. Resilience, or we'll use that word, we'll come back to that word very shortly. Okay, folks, I think we should make a start. So good afternoon, welcome to Mental Toughness for Wellbeing. This is our third workshop webinar that we've done. We started with remote management last week, and then we talked about working from home. So this afternoon, we're talking mental toughness for well-being. So my name is David Allen. I work with the Lighthouse Group as a trainer. I also have my own little consultancy called Let's Talk Tough. So as you can see, this is a subject close to my heart. So if I'm not working with the Lighthouse Group, then I'm also working with organisations, but particularly sports organisations and also schools, on mental toughness. So this afternoon, what we want to do is just have a little chat through what we mean by mental toughness, and particularly its relationship to well-being. And for me, it's, my background is as a business psychologist. So over the past 20 years or so, I've worked with organisations, primarily looking at talent and what makes high performers. And there's no surprises that mental toughness is right up there in terms of high performance in the workplace. Another thing that has also, over the past 10 years or so, really become quite popular and is used an awful lot in the working environment now is positive psychology. So my background in business psychology was essentially social psychology. But nowadays, a lot of work around sort of positive psychology, particularly in coaching. So glass half full stuff, and we'll be using some ideas and thoughts from positive psychology this afternoon when we're talking about mental toughness. And finally, those of you that may know me, it's a subject I'll always talk about and bore people to death on, is long distance triathlon, endurance athlete, ultra distance triathlons. So in the sporting environment, then I also practice what I preach as best I possibly can. And mental toughness is absolutely something that is tied into high performance in sport, and particularly within endurance. So in terms of where we're going this afternoon, as I said, really what I want to do over the next 45 minutes or so is to look at what we mean by mental toughness. And it's great already. We've got some really good comments in there in the chat box in terms of what others, you guys see as mental toughness being. So I do recommend anyone who's looking for kind of definitions, don't just look at mine, look at what's in the box there, because we all have experience to a certain degree of this subject. So I'm really interested to see what your thoughts are. We'll also look at, as I said, this relationship between mental toughness and well-being. Well-being being a hugely important subject at the moment, has been for a while, but particularly so over the past kind of month or two. And I guess, the key about well-being is kind of how are you at this stage of the game? I think there's a lot of people struggling with bits of information and lack of clarity, and maybe going back to work and maybe extending on furloughs. There's an awful lot of kind of ambiguity and uncertainty at the moment. And people are struggling in terms of their well-being. So mental toughness, I think, is a really important subject because absolutely mental toughness can help us with our well-being. To frame everything we're going to talk about this afternoon, I want just to introduce a model known as the 4C model of mental toughness. So just to give you an outline of that, it's probably the most validated model of mental toughness out there. So it's a really good framework for us to kind of hang our hats on and to see if we can do something with mental toughness in terms of building it. And to that end, then just some ideas on developing control. So control, you won't be surprised probably to see, is one of the C's of mental toughness. So if I can, what I want to do is just spend 15, 20 minutes or so giving you some thoughts and ideas on perhaps practical ways that you can look at that, look at gaining control. So a lot to cover in the next 45 minutes or so, and hopefully I can leave some time at the end for any questions that you may have. We're also being monitored by Helen, so any questions, please put them in the chat box, and if I can't get to them as I'm going along, then Helen will pick them up and we'll try and make sure we cover them at the end. So please use it for questions. As I say, use that for your thoughts and ideas and experiences too. It's great if you can share anything you've got so others can pick up on that as well. And I guess the other thing to sort of mention on this is, I'm guessing there's a whole lot of people, managers and otherwise, and I think, very much I'd like to take this from two dimensions. One is your own mental toughness. As we go through this little bit of time, I'd like you to really be considering kind of where you're at on any kind of scale, or where you're at in terms of how you see your own mental toughness. But obviously, and particularly perhaps in the professional environment, in terms of working, the challenges that you have, and particularly as a manager stroke leader, in terms of sort of helping other people get through tough times. So looking at both from personal and professional perspective this afternoon. If I go back an awful long time, to about when I was age 11, I got to my first football cup final, and I remember my mother was on the touchline, and I had kind of words to me as I ran onto the pitch: would do your best and enjoy it. Something I imagine many of you have said to your children, and probably was said to you as a child, maybe as an adult as well. I do remember that I think I sort of cast a look back saying, I'm not here to enjoy it, I'm here to win. The other competitive athlete in me. But those wise words have always stayed with me, and it's something I see in the workplace quite a lot, or perhaps don't see in the workplace quite a lot so much these days. I see quite a lot of people doing their best. I just question whether people are enjoying it. I do see people enjoying it, but not doing their best. But trying to get those two together is surely what it's all about. Research will tell you we get high performance from people who are able to do their best and enjoying it. But I think being your best is quite difficult these days. I talk to a lot of people who just swamped with work. Before this happened, is that people were struggling in the workplace, just too much work to do and too much distraction. So just being able to do your best is difficult. And even now, saying if you're working from home, wherever you may be, trying to do your best, I think, is an immensely difficult time with constant change going on. And what I see a lot of is highly capable people kind of unable to demonstrate that capability at work because, as I say, they're just kind of swamped with what's going on. So very much this sort of mental toughness bit is about trying to help people, both do their best, but also enjoy it at the same time. In terms of defining their mental toughness, there are kind of lots of definitions out there. So I'd like to see, and I'm just looking at some of those in terms of you've got understanding your limits, ability to juggle with issues at various levels, the ability to step away from situations that are mentally stressful, resilience, the ability to cope and recover. So, great definitions, and here are some that I've got for you. Being able to tackle the challenges that life throws at you. Being able to constantly take on new challenges. So I think on the one hand, it's about the stuff that kind of hits you smack in the face and you've got to deal with it. But also perhaps this kind of idea of kind of wanting to take on new challenges. We'll come on to that in a minute or two. Demonstrating Grit, a book written probably 5-6 years ago by a lady called Angela Duckworth, who talks about passion and perseverance, grit, as something more important than talent. And so it's passion and perseverance that makes high performance, not necessarily talent. Overcoming mental resistance to make things happen is another good definition. So this just idea is that we hold ourselves back, and whether that's sort of self-limiting beliefs, or just this kind of, unable to do certain things because we've never tried it before, and we're fearful of certain things. So the ability to overcome mental resistance so that we can make new stuff happen. And then two, I like just being the best you can be on a daily basis, waking up and doing the best you possibly can. And also just never giving up. That never giving up is often a picture of mental toughness. And I think that's the bit that's, I wanted to kind of highlight really, that the mental toughness isn't necessarily about just being tough. Often we get this image of being hard as nails, these tough people, these kind of Royal Marines, Navy SEAL types who've written lots of books on mental toughness. And there are elements of that endurance needing to never give up. But I think also there's a much softer side to mental toughness. And it is that ability to absorb and to be able to kind of respond to challenge in a way that doesn't necessarily mean you've got to be physically hard to do so. So I want to kind of come on to that in a bit more very shortly. Right at the very bottom there, you've got a definition by Professor Peter Clough. You'll see at the bottom, and his colleagues, whose name I'm not even going to try and pronounce. A personality trait which determines how people respond to challenge, stress, and pressure. Professor, should I say, Peter Clough, is the gentleman responsible for the 4C model of mental toughness. So he spent his sort of life's work looking at this subject. Initially from a sporting perspective, he was a professional rugby league player, and then from a work perspective over the past 20 years or so, as well as in education. So a lot of the stuff we kind of highlight in this talk this afternoon will come from Professor Peter Clough. And the book, Developing Mental Toughness, is the one he wrote around the 4C model, which I'd highly recommend. So there are some sort of broad definitions of mental toughness. But I think what I'd like to do is pull three elements from those definitions that I think are really important for us to kind of grab hold of and consider. So one is this concept of resilience. As mentioned there, I think Phil mentioned resilience, and I think absolutely you define it well, the ability to cope and recover. Bounce back ability is a word that's often used when we talk about resilience. You get knocked over, and it's that ability to get back up, dust yourself down and push on. And there's no doubt about it, original thinking behind mental toughness was very much focused on resilience, your ability to bounce back after sort of difficult, stressful situations. But I think there is more to it than that. So I think we also have to bring in fortitude. And fortitude for me is that ability to stand strong so that you're not knocked over. And I think fortitude can be seen in two ways. Fortitude can be that brick wall. It can be that solid part of you that refuses to budge. It doesn't matter what life throws at you, is you're able to stand strong. But there's also another element behind this, which is your ability to kind of bend and flow and to sort of weave with the knocks as they come. So you don't have to be hard as nails, and it's that ability to be able to sort of kind of bow out the way a little bit, or just kind of flex and absorb some of the stuff that comes at you. I think also defines fortitude. And then finally, I mentioned this a little bit earlier in terms of taking on new challenges. So the word I've got is endeavor. And mental toughness is about deciding to move on and move forward. It's about taking on new challenges. Something from my triathlon world is I'm always looking for a new challenge. And so there are those of us that absolutely are looking to take risks, to take on new challenges, to test ourselves. And we see that as a very positive, proactive thing. It's about driving change to a large degree. So endeavor is a kind of later added element to mental toughness, but I think a critical one. So I think those three elements really sum up. And I think, there's a good little sort of exercise in just kind of taking a step back and just think about the last month or two is kind of where you've demonstrated each one of those. Did you get knocked over in the early days? Either, I hope not, by getting the illness, and hopefully, obviously, recovering if you're here, or just kind of, getting furloughed, or just kind of, struggling because you had to close work. So I think, resilience was absolutely something we needed to do, is kind of bounce back fairly quickly. But also show fortitude, is to be able to stand strong and take the knocks that are coming. And I think there's a key one in endeavor, is that ability to and willingness to look forward. I think we're all having to look forward a bit now, is what is the next kind of 1, 3, 6 months going to look like for us? And so our ability to embrace what's going to happen, and not only be able to take it as it comes at us, but also be able to drive the future, is to be able to kind of innovate and create some new stuff, new ways of working, new ways of generating business. I think that's really important as we go forward next 3, 6 months or so. Lots of people ask me this question: why? Why is mental toughness important? Well, I think there are 3 key elements, and again, this comes from a lot of the research. So these aren't 3 words I'm sort of picking out. These are probably from all the research, 3 fundamental reasons. There are many more, but 3 fundamental reasons why mental toughness is important. So research will tell us that those that are more mentally tough, and I'll come back to that, or come on to that in a minute or two, in terms of how we define how tough we are, or how mentally tough we are. But mentally tough people tend to demonstrate high levels of positive behavior more consistently. So this positive mental attitude, this can-do attitude, the glass half full. I think, obviously this is really important in difficult times, is be able to kind of put a positive slant on things, to be able to kind of look forward. So there's no doubt about it that those that score mentally tough tend to generally demonstrate more positive behavior at all times, particularly when challenges comes their way. They're able to embrace. The next one is around performance and high performance. So I mentioned right at the very start, it's been a key area of mine, an interest of mine, is high performance at work, and why I was interested, and always been interested in mental toughness as a key driver. Because the research will say, and progressively so, that around 20 or 25% of high performance can be attributed to levels of mental toughness. So those that are mentally tougher will tend to perform higher. And when I say higher, I also mean more consistently again. So in terms of the working environment, in terms of the scholastic environment, i.e. in terms of the exams and exam performance, a lot of research is done around that, as well as in the sporting environment, then mental toughness and performance go hand in hand. And then finally, the bit I kind of again mentioned before, and really that I wanted to frame this talk on, is well-being. That those again that score high in mental toughness tend to enjoy better well-being. And I guess on that note, we probably need to define what we mean by well-being. So let's have a look for 5 minutes on well-being, as it's a word that we are pretty familiar with these days. It's just how to get it, how to be it. How is your well-being? How are you? The state of being comfortable, healthy, or happy is a very common definition for well-being. But I'd like to take that one stage further. So I'm going to show you something called the 14 characteristics of well-being. There is a PDF document that I'm going to ask Helen to share on the chat box in a moment or two, or at some point during the talk. So feel free to have a look at the PDF. It's just a sort of it's got the characteristics and enables you to rank yourself, score yourself, I think on a scale of 1 to 10. But I'd invite you to do that anyway, just in your head as we go through these 14 characteristics. One being, I have not got this characteristic at the moment. I haven't demonstrated it, and I'm struggling with it to a great degree. To 10 being, I am this characteristic, personified. I am the living, breathing embodiment of this characteristic, and probably somewhere in the middle. But I think these 14 characteristics will give us a pretty good kind of overview of well-being and the things that perhaps we need to be or do to increase it. So number one, no particular order to here. I'm going to skip through these relatively quickly because we could spend an hour on these alone, but most of them are, if not all of them, are pretty self-explanatory. So give yourselves a little kind of score. If you are unbelievably happy at the moment, give yourself a 10. Otherwise, start getting a little bit lower if you're not quite so happy and cheerful. And think of this perhaps over the past, week or so. You might want to do it today, but maybe over the past week or so, how have you been feeling? Vitality, how's your energy at the moment? Are you full of energy, or are you starting to kind of struggle with that energy? Is it all getting a little bit too much? There are some who are getting up early and going for their run, and others who are staying in bed a little bit longer. Where are you on the scale? Calmness, calm and relaxed. Emotional control is an important subject that we probably maybe touch on right at the very end, but something I spend a lot of time talking to people out. That ability to control emotion and that ability to stay calm and be relaxed is really important when it comes to well-being. Optimism, we've talked about that, being optimistic and hopeful about the future. Involved and engaged in what you do. People are struggling with this a little bit. Those that are working from home, we're starting to feel a little bit isolated, perhaps a little bit disengaged from what's going on and what we're doing. So I think that's one that often we're having to work on quite hard to remain involved. And from a manager and leadership point of view, it's really important that we are working hard to help people stay involved and feel engaged. Awareness. Being in touch with how you feel. This one is actually one that people are becoming more self-aware, I think. Maybe, and I'm talking very generically here, that maybe people have had a little bit more time just to kind of think and reflect. Maybe this kind of time has driven people to reflect a little bit and become a little bit more aware with kind of how we feel about what's going on and how we feel with those around us, etc. So awareness is a really important one. And then probably following that, accepting yourself the way you are. There are some people struggling with that front in just accepting the way they are at this time, often feeling just out of control, which is why this is an important one to be talking about, self-control, as we'll come on to in a minute or two. Do you accept? How do you accept the way you are when the way you are is not where you want to be at this stage of the game? Self-worth, tied in, liking yourself. How much do you like yourself? Self-worth, self-esteem, self-confidence, self-efficacy, all of these things are obviously linked and really important when it comes to well-being. Competence, feeling effective at what you do. Once again, some people have struggled with this one in terms of now working from home and struggle to work from home, struggle to get to grips with things like Zoom and communication and Microsoft Teams, or just feeling that you can't do what you were doing in the same way and thus not quite as effective. Development, are you developing or are you stagnating? So I think this is a really important one in terms of kind of general well-being and mental toughness is development and growth and learning. Find something to learn. How are you developing? What are you learning? And whatever that may be, it may be something to do with work, or it may be just learning to bake a cake or learning to run a bit faster. Development is important. 11, purpose, having a purpose and mission in life. Most of us get this one. Has that been threatened? Has that been challenged? Has it now become a little bit fuzzier? Or maybe it's actually clarified it to a certain degree. Maybe we have a slightly new purpose and mission in life. At number 12, significance, feeling that what you do is worthwhile. 13, congruence, feeling that what you do is consistent with how you see yourself. So is what you're doing again now and at work and with your family, etc. Is that kind of working alongside your values and self-beliefs about yourself? And at 14, connection, feeling close and connected to the people around you. I've no doubt you have been close to the people directly around you. I hope that's not wearing thin. I'm hoping it's driven you closer. And again, one of the problems we have is feeling unable to be close to the people we are close to or want to be close and connected to. That's quite difficult. So having a look at these characteristics and kind of just giving those a little score, even in your head, may just highlight areas where perhaps you're not doing quite so well, or perhaps you're not, you're not working on it at the moment, and just gives you that little bit of focus to think, oh, okay, maybe I can kind of do some work around purpose, maybe I can do some stuff around optimism, etc. But also recognizing where you are doing well, and I think that's really important to be able to kind of also go, no, actually, that I'm doing okay here. My well-being is pretty good in these areas. So give yourself a pat on the back, where you are scoring strong, and keep working on it. You're obviously doing something right. How do you bring that to other areas of your well-being? So underneath this well-being, though, is this mental toughness bit. So I'd like to kind of get back to that and bring you the 4C model, and to see whether that gives us some closer ideas as to things that we can be doing to develop our mental toughness, to improve our well-being, our performance, and perhaps our positivity. It can be measured, mental toughness. So before I introduce the 4C model, I think it's important to recognize that mental toughness is a personality trait that can be developed. It's known as a plastic personality trait. And what that means is that more and more research recently has identified a concept called neuroplasticity, i.e. that our brains are very capable of developing, of learning, of growing, of creating new neural pathways, so that we can develop a whole new us. Should we wish, we can be whoever we want to be, if that's not stretching it too far. That's not to say it's not extremely hard work and may not take, or may take a huge amount of time and effort to do so, but we can change. And mental toughness is what they call a sort of a softer plastic trait, i.e. there are some that are very hard and very difficult to change personality traits, whereas mental toughness is one that is not easy, but it's not overly difficult. There are two things that are really important. Number one is that we do something. So when we're trying to develop mental toughness, it's about taking action. It's about doing things on an ongoing basis, frequently, as with anything. Do it frequently, do it enough, and it becomes a habit, and it starts to build the neuro pathways and strengthen those. And so it becomes something we become better at. But it's also about doing things slowly, doing things in baby steps, one step at a time. I think often we try and take on too much when we're trying to kind of change who we are and what we do. So I think it's very much about identifying the little things that you can do on a frequent basis to build mental toughness. You can measure your mental toughness. There is something known as the MTQ, the Mental Toughness Questionnaire. This is the psychometric profile that Professor Peter Clough developed. So extremely well validated. And as I say, it's based around these 4 C's I'm going to explain to you in a moment or two. So those of you that are interested in doing a psychometric test and really finding out your levels of mental toughness, then you can do that. Please get in contact with me. I can administer the MTQ plus. So if you want more information on what that might look like, then just get in contact at any point, via Helen on the chat box. I'd be very happy to kind of give you some more information on the MTQ. The last thing to mention on that one is that the opposite, by the way, of mental toughness is not mental weakness. It's mental sensitivity. And there's nothing wrong with that. But there's nothing wrong with not being mentally tough. And mentally sensitive people can be very successful, and they can do great things. Except all the research will say that in difficult times, those that are more mentally sensitive will struggle, particularly around those 3 areas of positive attitude, performance, and well-being. So mentally tough people do better under challenge and in times of change. So there's nothing wrong with being mentally sensitive, but there is a challenge for those who are more mentally sensitive in difficult times. There's also an argument, by the way, to kind of say that you can be too mentally tough. So you start scoring 9s and 10s on the scale all over the place, and maybe there's cause for a little bit of concern is that you may be too much of a brick wall and maybe shutting too much off and blocking too much out, and that may not be a good thing. But as I say, more information on MTQ if you want to at the very end. Let's dig in to, please repeat opposite. The opposite of mental toughness is not mental weakness, it is mental sensitivity. That's what we were talking about, if that helps. I will make sure that PDF copies of this talk are available, by the way. So if you want to have any copies of that, then we can make, I'm sure, PDFs available to you. So here's the 4C mental toughness model as developed by Professor Peter Clough. And we'll put in the resilience, fortitude, and endeavor concepts that we've talked about already, 3 dimensions. And the first C, we have already mentioned, control, and this is what I want to come on to in a moment or two. So to give you a snapshot of the model, I just want to grab hold of one part of it and just give you a little practical exercise that we perhaps can do in terms of control. Then there is commitment. There is then confidence, and then finally challenge. So control, commitment, confidence, and challenge. Confidence and challenge are the 4 C's. Those 4 C's are broken up into 8 subdomains, 2 for each quadrant. So control is split into both self-control and emotional control. As I say, I'll come back to those in a minute or two. Commitment is about goal setting, your ability to set goals, and also achievement, to what degree you then have an achievement orientation towards achieving those goals. Some of you may be very good at goal setting, but perhaps not quite so good at achieving them. Other people achieve a lot, but it's not necessarily going anywhere. So they are different things, and it's about, you know, whether we can score highly both in goal setting and achievement that will give us a higher score in terms of commitment. And control and commitment are the 2 C's that are seen more to do with resilience, more to do with sort of bounce back ability. Whereas the confidence and challenge are those kind of more looking forward characteristics and traits. Confidence, both self-confidence and social confidence, interpersonal confidence, and challenge is to do with risk and learning. So our willingness to take risks and then ability to learn from those risks. So the MTQ software questionnaire looks at those 4 C's and those 8 subdomains. And each one of those can give us quite a good indication of where we lie in terms of mental toughness. But just having a look at those 8 things, self-control, emotional control, goal setting, achievement, self-confidence, social confidence, learning, and risk. Again, kind of using our 1 to 10 scales, you can quite quickly kind of look at, actually, I'd probably score fairly low on risk, for example, there, but pretty high in terms of emotional control. So you can kind of score yourself, and you wouldn't probably be too far out. Self-assessment is good, but it can be inaccurate. Feedback is also good. So, often it's great value in just kind of asking other people how they see us across these traits. And we can get some really good information in terms of us taking our time to think for ourselves, how we see ourselves, but also getting good feedback from others. And yeah, I think, in answer to the question, Samantha, is a good balance of these is great. And so if you have a good balance of all 4 C's, scoring 6, 7, 8, etc., then not only will you be able to kind of deal with a wider range, perhaps, of challenging situations that hit you, you will tend also to have a wider range of things that you're moving and able to adapt towards. And I think that word consistency comes out as well. If you score quite well across all 4, you tend to be more consistent in that mental toughness. However, almost certainly we will have areas where we tend to be stronger than others. And part of the exercise is to work on those perhaps that we're not so strong in. And so with that in mind, you can almost think, let's think about control and how strong we are in control, in areas of control. So I'm going to just show you an exercise in a second or two. I'm just going to hold fire on that and awesome sharing. So it's control that I'm interested in, self-control. The ability to manage one's impulses, emotions, and behaviors to achieve long-term goals. So there's a definition of self-control, our first C. And you may recognize that picture, that graphic, the marshmallow test. This was done quite a long time ago. You can go and Google it, YouTube it. The experiment was getting a group of children to come into a room with a marshmallow on the table, and they were given the instruction not to eat the marshmallow. If they could help it, the researcher was going to leave the room and come back. And if they hadn't eaten the marshmallow in 10 minutes, they'd get another marshmallow. And then the researcher left the room and the cameras rolled, and it just captured the struggles that these children went through in not eating the marshmallow. Some gave up the struggle pretty quickly. Some went through pain and torment for 15 minutes before they finally gave in, and others held out. And this was a really kind of nice experiment in self-control. And this was followed through for years and years. And the research sort of picked up that in later years, those that had held back from eating the marshmallow, who were able to demonstrate a high level of self-control, tended to did better in school, and also back in the working environment and in their relationships. So there was an absolute correlation between the marshmallow test and characteristics that went on later in life. Take of it what we will. It's quite an interesting and funny little experiment. But self-control is that ability to manage one's impulses, emotions, and behaviors to achieve long-term goals. For years, there's been a lot of talk around locus of control. Locus of control, if you did a psychometric in the past, sometimes it was about whether you had internal or external locus of control. Those that had internal locus of control tend to make things happen. I think it's that, again, positive attitude about being able to feel that you can make a difference, that you can do something, as opposed to an external locus of control where you kind of tend to think that things happen to you. A lot of people, external locus of control, are kind of going, yeah, told you so, over the past month or two. But they're the ones that are really struggling with it. Why is it always happening to me? Why me? Why at this time of life? And that's quite a difficult thing to be able to manage if you have an external locus of control. I'm just picking up something around in the chat box, Deborah. How does this measure individuals on the autism spectrum? I think there's a huge subject around that, and particularly around being able to kind of deal with change, I think. So I think there are certain sort of attributes in mental toughness that are strong in autism, but I think a lot of it is about the challenge and the risk and the learning from that and change. I'd be very happy to talk a bit more at the end if you'd like to kind of stay on or chat further around how that's applied, particularly in areas such as autism, etc. So here's a little exercise that I'd like to kind of do with you, or just to give you some ideas on. It's a practical exercise around control, and it's one I use quite a lot. Anyone who's done a sort of management development program with me may well have done something very similar, and it's based on what's often known as the circles of influence. A guy called Stephen Covey wrote a book about 15, 20 years ago, maybe even longer now, called The 7 Habits of Highly Effective People. And he had the circles of influence, which were 3 circles: one of control, and one of influence in the middle, and one of concern. I've taken out the middle one, the circle of influence, because what I'm interested in is our circle of control, our green circle, and our circle of non-control or concern, which is the red circle. And the exercise is this. The exercise is to use Post-it notes. So just grab Post-it notes, and on a Post-it note, one per Post-it note, just write down your current challenges. What are the things that have challenged you over the past week, month, period of time? And as I say, one challenge per Post-it note. And so, for example, if I think about, and I did this a couple of weeks ago originally, if I think about some of the things that have been a challenge in our house, then the housework is one. Now, I would say that's always been a challenge, but it's a challenge that is under my control. I can pick up a hoover and I can hoover the floor. My wife would probably argue that I don't, but I can, and it's within my control to do so. So I can control the housework. I can control my exercising to a degree. Okay, I'm only allowed out for an hour a day, although that's changing tomorrow, I believe. But I can also use my garden, fortunate to have a garden, and if necessary, I could also stay inside and do my sit-ups and press-ups, etc. So exercise is absolutely something within my control, and as is home working. So lucky for me that I was have the ability to use Zoom and to be able to talk to you guys via this wonderful medium. Not as good as being in a sort of classroom or workshop environment, but absolutely, something that enables me to do my job. However, there are things that perhaps are not in my control and that concern me. So this red circle, the circle of concern, there was a graphic, for some reason concern hasn't come up. But things that I can't control, things that there is nothing I can do about. So perhaps one of these is looking after my mum, is, because of isolation, is that unable to look after my mother, who lives a reasonable way away, so can't get to her and obviously can't go and visit. So something many people can identify with. Homeschooling, an area of concern that I feel out of control, or did feel out of control with. Very difficult as kids kind of struggling with technology and boredom and the like. So that became quite an issue. And then, maybe things like paying the mortgage is not having the same kind of income coming in. Then all of a sudden, this is just not within my control, is that ability to pay the mortgage if I can't work. So we start to get the idea. And so, 3, 4, 5, 6, 10 post-it notes of your biggest challenges. Don't go too far. But if you can identify your kind of greatest challenges at the moment, put them on a post-it note and then just plot them and just see what it looks like. And there's a really good exercise just in that, just in just kind of having a look at what's within your control and what is not. But let's take this one stage further, because I think it's kind of quite glib to say, if it's not within your control, don't worry about it. There is a school of thinking called, one that's gone completely out of my head, Stoicism. Sorry, I was going mad and I had distraction in the background. Stoicism. Anyone who's interested in mental toughness and well-being and things like control would do well to have a look at the ancient Roman Greek philosophy of Stoicism, whose kind of key tenet is about sort of being able to stand strong and to kind of deal with what you can, deal with what concerns you that you can control. And if you can't control it, then don't let it concern you. It's a great philosophy. However, some people are saying it's not quite as simple as that. So there's an exercise I want to show you here that develops this one stage further, which kind of goes, how do we move what is in our circle of concern into one of control? And it's based on a model that's little known called ambitious targets. And I won't go into the background of it, but ambitious targets comes from something called the theory of constraints that many use in project management. But ambitious targets is a simple tool that I ask you to identify an ambitious target. So what it says is, and again, use post-it notes on a big wall or a flip chart to identify an ambitious target. So what is it that you want to do? This could be an organizational target. This could be a personal target. What I've done is I've taken one of my challenges and just changed the language. So homeschooling being a problem, I've just turned around to being an ambitious target, which is to help my youngest child become self-motivated to study her maths. So there's an ambitious target, unbelievably ambitious. The exercise now says, post-it notes again, is okay, so that's our ambitious target. What's stopping that happen? What are the blockages? What are the problems? What are the challenges? So number one, we sat down and wrote these little post-it notes out. So number one, not enough structure or no structure. Number two, poor technology. She was struggling with being able to kind of use her iPad and grab hold of Teams, etc., as were her school. Too much distraction going on, no great surprises there. She just didn't understand equations, and that's what she was being asked to do, nor do I, still don't. And as part of that, then she felt she wasn't getting enough support from me or my wife, who was no better, or even from the school. She was kind of struggling with that one a bit, didn't feel she was getting enough support. So there's a kind of snapshot. So the exercise is kind of identifying all the things that are stopping whatever it is your ambitious target happening. And this is a really good group exercise as well, in terms of, okay, here's our target for the year or whatever it might be, what's stopping us achieve it? And there's a good psychology in negative thinking, just allowing people to think negatively to be able to come up with all the reasons why that ain't going to happen. Our next step is just to change the language. So quite simply, we get a new set of post-it notes out. I've written these in green. It says if we've got no structure, what we need to do is get structure. If we've got poor technology, we need to get good technology. If there's too much distraction, get less distraction. If we don't understand equations, understand equations. And if there's not enough support, then we need enough support. So all we're doing at this stage is changing the language. And there's a good psychology now in saying, okay, so now we get what we need to do. Can we get rid of the negatives? And often if the answer is yes, then you're left with 5 things that need to kind of happen to get to our ambitious target. The next step in the process then is to put those in order. So i.e. which one of what has to happen first. And what you're going to do here is basically create a map. So move your post-it notes, keep your child self-motivated or your ambitious target at the top, and then plot your post-it notes in order to which one you feel needs to happen first. So we went through this exercise and said, okay, well, let's start with less distraction, then we can get some structure, then perhaps we can look at the support, then let's look at technology, and then let's see if we can understand equations. Doesn't matter what the order is, but what you're doing is you're creating a map, a blueprint for where to go. And I think this is very powerful. It's a very powerful planning exercise, is to be able to see the route to where where you've got to go to get to where you need to get to. So we plotted this out, and using arrows is quite important, particularly if you've got sort of 10, 20, 30 post-it notes. But what's most important now is the one that sits at the bottom. Which one has to happen first? And we said, okay, less distraction has to happen first. Great, let's get on with that. Let's just create less distraction. Hang on a minute, not as easy as that. It's just not a case of less distraction. There are issues with, there's challenges with just kind of less distraction. Okay, well, if that's the case, then what we need to do is we need to start all over again, a level lower. So less distraction becomes our new ambitious target, and we go through the process again. What's stopping that? Well, the radio on next door is on too loud. Sister's working in the same room. Too many notifications coming up on her iPad for Facebook and whatever it is. What is it, TikTok these days? Too many distractions outside the window. There were lots of reasons why less distraction was not quite the easy thing we thought it might be. But by identifying those, going through the same process, and all of a sudden what you need to do then is just start to plot them again. So which one do we start with? Well, maybe turn the radio off next door. And all of a sudden we've got to something that's absolutely within our control. Absolutely something we can do something about. It's one step perhaps on a long journey to the child being self-motivated to study maths, but at least it's something we could do. And she felt she could do. She could go and turn the radio off. And that's really enabling, and that's really important when it comes to self-control. So where you feel you have things that are outside of your control and that concern you, it is just a chunking down technique. It's about breaking those things down into small pieces. But it's more than doing that. It's about creating a map to see where your first step needs to be, but then where your second and third and fourth step needs to be. As they say, a journey of 1,000 miles or 10,000 miles starts with a single step. But you need that step to be in the right direction. And maybe something like this is quite helpful when it comes to kind of taking control of some things that absolutely you feel out of control within. Try it. It's a practical exercise. Get your post-it notes out and give it a go. So there's just a little exercise around self-control. I'm just going to leave you with one thought, really. And this one alludes to emotional control. And emotional control is a massive subject, but and I just want to kind of leave on a bit of a cliffhanger to a certain degree. With this statement, when was the last time you said or did something that immediately or soon after you wished you hadn't? So on the one hand, we have self-control. On the other hand, and tied into that, absolutely, we have emotional control. Our ability to keep control of our emotions, to not get too upset, too angry, too anxious. Generally, we're talking negative emotions. Sometimes it's getting too excited, too exuberant. But how often do we kind of lose emotional control? How often is it you said something or done something or even thought something that kind of pretty soon afterwards you thought, kind of shouldn't have done that, kind of wish I hadn't done that, kind of don't think that was the best of me. And if that's something you do relatively frequently, then maybe we need to kind of work on emotional control a bit more. I'm just going to direct you to a book called The Chimp Paradox, written by a guy called Dr. Steve Peters. He absolutely talks, and that's his statement, by the way, when was the last time he said or did something. And if emotional control is something maybe you struggle with, and maybe you are struggling with at the moment, go have a look at The Chimp Paradox. It's an easy read, it's a really interesting read, an enjoyable read. And it's a kind of 101 on the brain and how the brain works, and particularly our limbic system, our emotional control center, which is what he calls the chimp. And some great ideas on how to get better control of your emotions. So go have a look, The Chimp Paradox. Otherwise, folks, I'd like to kind of just leave a little bit of time at the end, just to see whether there are any questions on this subject that we've talked about, either to do with well-being, to do with the 4C model of mental toughness, or to do with elements of control. So let me pass it across to you. For those that have got the idea and have other things to do, then thank you very much indeed for your time this afternoon. I hope that was of interest. I hope that was of a little bit of use. Get in contact with Lighthouse Group if there's something that you'd like us to kind of talk to you more about. Otherwise, I look forward to hopefully catching up with you guys again Thursday. I believe we have another workshop webinar, and I think we are talking compassionate leadership, so a huge subject again at the moment. So anyone who's in that kind of management leadership role, then compassionate leadership is our subject. So thank you very much indeed for your time. If you have any questions, then happy to take them. Otherwise, have a great day and speak to you next time. Thank you, folks.
David, there are a few questions I've sent up to you.
Okay, guys. So I've got a couple of questions there. I think I alluded to as we went around. So in terms of the characteristics being in balance for mental toughness and well-being, yeah, a good balance of the 4 C's is important, ideally for rounded and consistent mental toughness. You know, we'll have strengths and we will have weaknesses, or areas where we are more sensitive, to use the correct language. And it's up to us whether we can develop them or not. But essentially, if we are able to score relatively well across all 4 C's, then we will tend to do better when it comes to bigger challenges over a consistent period of time. Does the measurement suggest that someone is autistic? No, I don't think so. I don't think they will suggest autism. There is, say, quite a lot of study around mental toughness and autism. But a lot of it is around, as I think I mentioned already, this ability to deal with change and ambiguity. And I think that's where the struggle lies. So those kind of C's around challenge and confidence, I think often are a bit of an issue.
David, somebody's asked what the exercise and vent refer to on the last slide.
Yeah, okay. There are 3 there. I thought I stopped sharing, to be honest. These are 3 things that Dr. Steve Peters talks about in his book. So just very quickly, if you're still around and want to just have a quick overview, and I didn't go through these because of time and just moving on. But exercise is literally physical exercise. So go and physically exercise. So really important in terms of controlling your emotions. Most of us know that. So go and do exercise. Vent is being able to talk to someone, is be able to kind of release your emotions in a controlled way. So being able to talk to someone, either from a working perspective, still being able to talk to bosses and colleagues or people you have a strong relationship with. That ability to kind of just let go of some of the feelings so that it's in a controlled situation. So what's not happening is we're getting frustrated and angry. And boxing is our ability really just to control those emotions, to be able to do things like breathe or count to 10, just to walk away when we feel like we're about to lose emotional control. Boxing our chimp is that ability to tell our chimp to hold fire, just breathe easy, and we will go and exercise it later, or we'll go and shout later on, but for now it needs to be under control. And those people that are good at exercising emotional control are good at boxing their chimps. They have learned to be able to control that element. They release it later, but they don't release it at the wrong time. Those are what those three mean. And that's absolutely what the Chimp Paradox book is about. I hope that gives you a quick picture of that. Thank you, guys. Thank you very much indeed. Any more questions from anybody? Yeah, thanks, Sue. Thanks for your suggestion. Yeah, it's certainly worth a thought to see whether we can make slides available.
Deborah's asked me to unmute. Hang on. Deborah, you should be unmuted now.
Hi, I'm sorry. I just thought it would be easier if you could speak a little bit more about my question on individuals that are on the autism spectrum, and if this would be a good instrument to evaluate them. Thank you.
Yes, I think it is, but I think it depends on kind of where on the scale, I think. And I guess it's about why, what you would want from it, whether, to what degree you were able to then put in interventions to develop. Does that make sense? Some of the traits. Sorry, you still there?
I can't unmute her, David.
Okay.
Now try. Oh, he's got.
Okay, so I guess what I'm wondering is if we use this, would it be a way of developing those goals and, you know, accomplishing what we need to as far as an outcome? It really sounds like you're wanting, I mean, it could be useful, but I guess you're right. Depends on where they are, and are they able to actually be able to modify their behavior or something to that degree to be able to benefit from it. I don't know. I mean, I have other options, but I was just curious as to whether or not this would be something. It kind of has the steps that look at it that way too.
Yeah, and I think, you know, so I think, I mean, the answer is yes, and it's that, you know, that argument between sort of mental health and sort of mental well-being. But I think in my experience, and I haven't worked usually, you know, with this tool and those with autism. However, I guess, certainly in schools with those with learning disability, I've certainly seen some really good results, particularly around the sort of, the confidence element, which is interesting. And so that sort of self-confidence and social confidence is quite a good one to come out. But so without knowing, I guess, more, then I'm always a little bit kind of wary, because I know from others' experience where it hasn't worked, because it hasn't been clear on kind of what to do with it once it's kind of measured, and that just it doesn't kind of solve anything, if you see what I mean. So I can't, Deborah, I'm not sure if you're there.
I can't talk unless you unmute. Okay, so yeah,
Right.
I do see potential. I really do, and I think that's encouraging. I mean, just the way that you processed how to really achieve the emotional control and understanding how you sort through and take those baby pieces in order to get from point A to B to get to the ultimate place you needed them to be. So I do see some positive in it. A lot of the kids that I work with, they're geniuses when you look at them. They're autistic, but yet there's something about it it's very intriguing. And you having the background in psychology, I'm sure you understand that even on that continuum, they're functioning high in some levels. You just have to reach their niche. You have to be able to study them enough to be able to understand, wow, if I can just connect with where they are, they're amazing. They're amazing.
Sorry, no, I absolutely agree, and I think that's why I'm kind of being a little bit hesitant, because I think on the one hand, what the mental toughness thing can do is really kind of help pinpoint some of the areas that maybe they will struggle with, but it's that ability then to kind of translate that into an intervention that will really help them, and be able to kind of break it down and find little kind of the practical exercises, the activities, the right way to build from there. And that's where I always get a little worried, is often the scales are there and are identified, but then people aren't able then to take that forward onto the next kind of step, and it can be more frustrating than kind of productive, if that makes sense.
It absolutely does. It's a very interesting thing. I think I'm going to try it and see, because I've had some kids where I think just thinking outside the box and looking at, what will be, you want to look at something that's favorable to them, not necessarily more convenient to me, and investing that energy into something that helps them to be successful is the ultimate goal. And it's certainly my responsibility. So it really makes sense. And I really appreciate your presentation. And I look forward to maybe finding out a little bit more about you and picking your brain.
Yeah.
I seem to be doing that more often than norm, just because I'm stuck here at home trying to make sense of my world. So I really do appreciate it. Thank you so much.
No, you're very welcome. I'd be very happy to kind of spend some more time to be really interesting for me. Well, how old are these kids in general, just out of interest?
Oh my. I'm working with pre-K through 12 actually.
Okay.
And they're brilliant. And not only that, but we're mainstreaming a lot of students and trying to say, hey, look, you know what? We're not looking at what you can't do. We're looking at what you can do, and then trying to enhance that. So, the response that I gave you initially was they have to embrace where they are and say, hey, look, this is what I'm working with. And we have to embrace where they are as well. And then move beyond that and say, but we can do a whole lot. I can take a pound of flour and make a whole lot of stuff, but it doesn't clearly connect with the way I need to be looking at the students, but it gives them a general idea of, hey, you might say what you cannot do, but I say what you can, and we're going to work on trying to figure out how much of that you can accomplish.
Yeah, brilliant. No, fascinating. I think it's a brilliant that you're doing it. It must be really interesting.
Oh, I love it. I do. I love it more so than, when you start to appreciate it and you start to see the challenges on me to be able to figure it out. And I can usually read a kid within the first 5 minutes, 10 minutes, and then I'm honing in and then, really tossing things at them. But the key is to make them think that they came up with the idea.
Yeah.
To make them believe that this was what they came up with. And then they take so much ownership of it and it's theirs. And you get so many, you can see that light bulb come on in their eyes and they just become alive. And it's all, I didn't do it. It's just a blessing to be able to be a part of that.
No, that's fantastic. No, that's really good. I think you're absolutely right. And that ownership bit is absolutely key. And I know is when they suddenly feel that they did it. And the confidence that then breeds, I think, is huge. That's fantastic.
Yeah.
Thank
All right,
you.
I won't take up too much more of your time. You're wonderful. And like I said, I look forward to joining you in the future.
I hope so. Thank you very much, Deborah. Take care.
Yep, you too. Be well.
See you. Bye-bye.
Anyone else have any more questions?
Matthew, Catherine, Miguel. I think we're done, Helen.
Well, can't go anywhere.
Miguel, you're stuck with us.
That was forever. Hang on, let me stop recording.